Everybody. We're going to talk today about some of Pat's greatest comeback trades that he's ever had. The reason I wanted to talk to him about this because I was just kind of thinking about the road that he's been on since he started, and yeah, I've heard many times about this conversation Pat has had about what really changed the game for him, and I know a lot of people have heard it, but even as many times as I've heard it, it's still a story that fascinates me because something shifted in him that really changed the trajectory of his career. And I think it's so critical for people who are learning to trade and who might be stuck to hear the story because he confronted something within himself that even then I right now I still don't fully understand because I don't feel that I've actually experienced the shift as much as I've personally devoted everything to this craft. I still feel like there's something that still can be learned from this story. So Pat, why don't you tell me about this conversation you had, but also then we're going to talk about some of the how that led you to some of these greatest comebacks of your career and the challenges you faced in maybe some trades that went against you, or you maybe thought you were going to lose a lot and it went the absolute other way, and how you handled it.
Yeah, I think the very first thing that comes to mind about like great comeback stories, and this one I know some people have heard before, but that's all right. I've got a couple of comebacks where it turned into massive trades, but were they really great trades? I think we'll have to find out with that one. I've told this. I've had 3 day trading accounts. The very first one I completely blew up. That was the biggest account that I had at the beginning, and that's a lot of money to me back then, man. Like that's all the money I had in the world. Like that's it.
Big.
It was a $25,000 account. Actually, it was like 27 and change. And I'm sure to a lot of people out there, like that's a lot of fucking money. And like I've said before, I've always respected money, but I torched that fucking account, like torched it. I still can remember the pain of that one. See, what the problem was with that one, right off the hop, I had some beginner's luck. And that's all it was. That's all it was. It was just beginner's luck. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But I didn't make enough to really like grow that account so big that now I have that breathing room when you're learning, right? So long story short on that one, it didn't last very long. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but man, I torched that thing. I just blew it up on like a bunch of like really bad trades. And then the second account was still like a decent sized account. And it was about 3/4 the size of that first one, maybe a little bit less. That one I more whittled back. That one I kind of learned my lesson. Like I said, the pain of that first account blow up was pretty rough because that to me was all the money I had. It took so long to get that money back to save again, and it set me behind on my plans. I wanted out of the welding industry so fucking bad. I could just like feel it in my bones. So having to go back and like go gather other contracts and make money for that second account for quite a while. I built it and I was doing well with it, but then I started getting scared because I remembered the pain of that first loss, and I started whittling it back until ultimately I just blew that one up, torched that one too.
Sorry, real quick. So it was more kind of whittling, like paper cut losses, or did you kind of like, all right, I'm going in big on this one so I can get back my losses, or how did that shift from your trajectory of taking losses? Were they educational losses, or just what the hell did I do that for? Because there's a difference,
Yeah,
right?
they definitely weren't educational losses. Like there's always a cost to tuition. Like paper cut trades, don't get it twisted. Like when you're paper cutting your losses, they're just like death by 1,000 paper cuts. I don't want to say that that's fine, but there is a pay to play aspect to day trading. There's a tuition cost, and the tuition is losing trades. It just is. That's where you're going to learn the most, is out of losses. But the problem is with that, like thinking back on that, they just weren't. See, what I would tell myself is I would say things like, oh, I'm just going to try this.
Mm-hmm.
See, one of the problems that I had, and what's different from a lot of you people watching this right now, is back when I started trading, there was nobody out there to learn from. And I think people will argue that fact, but there wasn't. I joined one service, and that was it. And like I've said 1,000 times, I was only in there for a week or two and just canceled. It was garbage. His strategy looked about the best when he's selling something, but it was dog shit. And really, and that's not just from a new trader. And that's the hard part too. When you're a new trader, like, you don't know what you don't know. But as an intelligent human being, I could see there was nothing there. Just pissing in the wind type of losses. And there were some big ones of, like, having emotion take over and all of that, and taking big, stupid, like, just dumb trades, trying to, like, basically gamble. It wasn't trading, right? But for the most part, I was growing as a trader, though. Like, I can't take anything away from that. I did start to get my shit together. Okay. But I still wish, man, like, I could do a whole video on it. I wish at that time, but then of course it's wishing, and there really wasn't anybody out there. Not that anybody I could find anyways, that could show me how to properly do this. I just wish there was. It would have saved me a lot of fucking around, and a lot of money, and a lot of heartache is what would have happened. And then, like I said, my last account, which is the last account I've ever had, and now it's growing, I whittled that down to about half. It was a $5,000 account. That was the last bit of money I could beg, borrow, steal type of situation. Like, that's it. Like, there was no money left underneath the couch cushions. There was no money in the change jar. Everything went into the bank and then wired into that account. That was it. I've already borrowed the absolute max amount and everything else, and borrowed from friends and everything, and I could never ask them again. Like, it was just at the point where, okay, you need to get your shit together. Like, you've borrowed too much money, and you're starting to look like a fucking idiot and everything else. And that's maybe where a little bit of, like, I'll just call it ego, can kind of help you, where it's not ego, but we'll call it that, where it's like, it's your pride. Like, my pride really kicked in, and I think that was really my saving grace. And pride can get you into trouble, don't get me wrong. But I could not ask anybody again. I couldn't. I wouldn't be able to do that. And you got to remember, at that time too, like, I was hiding my trucks from the repo man, not being able to pay rent. I was always late on rent. And then it was just that conversation, man. It was that conversation about just, like, getting my fucking shit together. Like, absolutely no more. Like, I'm fucked. I am backed into a corner. There is no way I can go back. I can't go back to welding. There's no way I'm going to do that. I'm in it. Like, I'm in it. There's no way out. Like, this is it. It's time to, like, it's time to do it and do it right. And the conversation I had was essentially coming up with the rules that I still trade by now. Obviously, they've evolved quite a bit since then. But the base rules, and, like, it's not even rules, it's just discipline. It's like, no more fucking around, man. Like, you can't be taking stupid trades. There's no more of that. That does not work, right? I got fairly lucky off the hop in that very first trading account, right? And I had some not huge wins. They weren't by any stretch of the imagination, but it was enough to kind of give me a little bit of breathing room. And then that's when it just all came tumbling down on that first one. So I think, like, for a comeback story, that conversation that I had with myself, and I'm thankful that I was able to just confront myself like that. Because back then, it's not like that was something that I would do. I would stuff shit deep down inside, never deal with it again. Didn't happen, move on.
Right.
But you can't exactly do that in trading, can you? Right?
So the conversation came down to, I guess, it's like, well, why didn't you have that conversation 25 grand ago? But it's almost like you didn't know what you needed to know to be able to have that conversation in the first place. So let's say you had blown through, just for round numbers, 50K. to get to that point, right? Getting gains, giving that money back, and then whittling more some back. It came down to just simply like, it seems like you had at that point enough experience to know what you needed to know to do what you needed to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you almost
Yeah.
had to mess around and take those losses to have the perspective of, this is the formula of me, and this is the formula of the technicals that needs to come together in alliance. There was a point in time where you couldn't have had that conversation without that $50,000 investment in yourself. So
No.
you didn't have the education because it didn't exist. So you had to pay 50K for the education. But now for
That's right.
people watching this, it's like, well, yeah, you can go spend that 50K to get to education, or you can just kind of hijack that and take a shortcut and learn from the guy that made those investments a different route because they didn't exist at the time.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't understand, Adam. Like, and here's the hard part with explaining this, man. People will always err on the side that it's just like, oh, he's just trying to sell me something. He doesn't really mean that. Adam, you've been down to my home. Do I ever strike you as a guy that does that? Like, I'm not here to fuck with someone. Like,
I'll say on the contrary, it's, to me, it continues to be like, I've put myself in your shoes. Like, man, why is he's making all this money? He's got all this thing to travel the world and live on a boat and do all these romantic, fun things with your life. Yet you're somebody who has stayed rooted and grounded in the value of a dollar and finds much more fulfillment and satisfaction, not in the material rewards of the world, but in the true rewards of seeing other human beings grow. I mean, to
yeah,
me, that's what I've seen personally, that from what I can tell has been going on in your mind since the day you found your success, not something you just decided
yeah.
to wake up and do a year or two ago.
There's just a lot of people, they don't understand that because they're selfish by nature. I can be selfish, but I think for the most part, like I always said, it's like, and I'm not a praying man, but there's some things when you're backed into a corner that you do pray, and you start to make deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody does it, and that was one of the deals that
Interesting.
if I could ever get my shit together and I make it out, and I don't have to go back, yeah, I'm kind of I might need a minute here, but if I could, I just I'll help, right? You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's why I get fucking really pissed off is when people assume, because they really have no fucking idea what it's like to be backed in that corner. Yeah, they have no idea. They don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know. They really don't know. It's going to cost you far more doing it on your own. It just is. It's one of the reasons why I started Trick Trades. They see, people don't understand the reason why I started Trick Trades. There wasn't anything out there. There wasn't anything out there. I came before that. So the Tim Sykes, the Ross Camerons, the fucking Jason Bond, that was it. And Cameron Foose, that's it. That's all that was there. Now, you can't tell me that any of that education that they provide is actually going to make you a consistently profitable trader. It won't. And there's a reason why on week 2, I think it took like 2 weeks of me opening up that free Discord room and the education that I was giving away for free. I had thousands of members, thousands. And they just like, they don't get it. And then they'll say, well, why didn't you just keep it free? Well, that was the plan. That's a whole other story. There's a lot of, and I've told Adam this story, and it's a fucked up story that people would do that. So I think that's what it is. I think basically, either you whittle yourself down and you pay an extraordinary amount of money doing it on your own, or you learn from someone that like has been through the fucking ringer, man. And that's it. So comeback number one is having that conversation with myself and learning those lessons the hard way. Don't be afraid of those calluses and those scars and those cuts and those bruises mentally, because they are necessary. They're necessary to build you. You have to be forged in fire. You need to be battle tested. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't quite understand is you need those mental calluses. You need to almost take that military perspective when like they're in boot camp and you got to break yourself down to then build yourself up. So having that conversation, definitely comeback number one.
Which comes down to one word I hear is just discipline. It's as simple as that, right? No more complicated. It's discipline, getting the information you need to have something to be disciplined about, right? I could be a disciplined person who wants to get in shape, but if I don't have the information I need to do the exercises properly that I need to do and have the diet that I need to adjust, all the discipline in the world will make a lick of difference. So either you pay through it through hard knocks, or you get someone who's been there and you get the knowledge that you need, and then you apply the discipline, right? And so you can't just apply discipline to thin air and expect anything to change.
No. And I think that brings me to comeback number two. Comeback number two, I actually took a trade. It was a trade on SIG. And we'll pull up the chart. It had to do with revenge trading. And you got to remember, like, this is a process. I've been doing this now for 11 years. And when this happened, I was probably doing this for about 3.5, 4 years. And I was teaching at Trick Trades and consistent and overall badass, but still make mistakes. You're always going to make those mistakes. This one, I'm so grateful that it happened because I learned such a valuable lesson. See, it was a day trade on SIG, and there was it was starting to near a technical level of resistance to take it short, but I was early, and that was a big loss. It was a big loss, and what I did after was it was a revenge trade. Like, I can lie to myself and look back on the chart and see that there were technicals there. But again, I started back in early. Like, as soon as I got out and took that loss, it was only like maybe a couple of minutes later, I started tapering in again. And it ended up being a massive trade. I ended up making, it was like $58,000 or something like that on that trade, 60 grand, right around there. And I remember members saying, oh, that's so awesome. Holy shit. Congratulations. Wow. All of that. And I got really mad. I got mad at myself. It was one of the worst trades. It's actually what I still consider one of the worst trades I've ever taken because of the revenge trade angle to it. And I talked to the members about that after, and I did a mentoring live class on it, I believe. And I talked to the entire group as well, just talking about how stupid that was, where that thing easily could have kept going, and that $60,000 gain could have easily been $100,000 plus loss very easily. For those of you that have never traded SIG, when it has a catalyst, which it kind of did, there was some news that came out. That thing moves, man. It is a ranger. Not so much anymore, but back in the day in 2017, that thing moved points. Like, one candle could be like 2-3 points. And it was super volatile because it was a low floater, but a high price stock. That's like trading the volatility of like a dollar stock. Now trade a $50 stock type of thing, a $30 stock with that level of volatility. Yeah, that's fucking crazy, right? It was a huge comeback. Don't get me wrong, but I think the biggest takeaway from that one, and I can share the chart with you guys. Maybe we'll do that. So what I want to kind of point out here is you guys can obviously see this range, right? You can see this range. Oops, I kind of strayed off there. You see this day right there. That day. You see that little doji candle? That was it. That's the day. So on this day right here, so it's approaching this range, right? It's approaching this range. Well, I started in really early. Now, it opened up right at that previous close. What I know now, I know that bitch is going to squeeze. Now, it did sell off a little bit that day, and I was able to recoup my losses, but I was shorting right up against resistance. Like, opens up, and the resistance is right there. All it takes is one scared short to pop that, and that's essentially what happened. And it came up quite a bit, and it broke the previous day's highs, which is right there, if you guys can see that. And then once it broke that and confirmed, I did have to take that off for a loss. And then, looking back at it and zooming out on the chart, there's a gap fill over here, and it actually filled that gap perfectly right there. And that gap fill is right there, right where that cursor is. And that's where it came into. But again, I didn't wait for those technicals. That would be a lie if I fucking told you that. And I'm not going to lie to you. What I did is, as soon as I got out and it started squeezing up more, I just started fucking loading in, and I kept correcting that average, and it was a horrible trade. It was horrible, guys. It was horrible. And I tried playing it off like it was like I knew what I was doing and it was under control. And I'm just being perfectly honest and candid with you guys. And I think that that's what bothered me so much, where the act of not wanting to be wrong, especially in front of a group of people that's like depending on you. Once they started congratulating me on it, that's when I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm not doing that. This is bullshit. I'm not going to be one of those guys. And that's when I told people exactly, kind of what my thoughts on it were. And although I made 60 grand on it, I wish I would have taken that loss. I wish, and this is really hard for people that are struggling with money to understand, or struggling in general. You don't want to earn trades like that, guys, or earn P&L like that. That trade was a horrible trade. And it's one, I've told this story many times over. These revenge type of trades, they're only going to blow you up. And my saving grace is that I caught myself starting to lie to myself, where it was like I was just on the cusp of giving myself a pat on the back. Seeing that P&L and seeing $60,000 sitting there for a trade, and that's after the loss that I made. So that trade was actually more like an $80,000-$85,000 trade. It was a huge trade, man. Especially at that time in my trading career. Holy shit, that's a big one. It's a big one. But I didn't earn it. And it was a bullshit trade. And I wish at that time, because I would have, although I still learned that lesson in that revenge trading, I will say 99.9% of the time, because there's always that 0.1% chance that it'll never happen again. And to this day, I'm so cautious and I'm so careful with that, because it burned me, not on the P&L, it burned me mentally. This is a hard one, again, for traders to understand. They don't understand that your P&L, and this right here, you can go into my social media and a million of my videos and everything else, and you'll hear me say the P&L don't mean shit. That's why. This is the exact trade where I finally learned that lesson. And that was years into my trading career. And I was consistent, and I was profitable, and I was successful. But it took getting to a different level and then doing something really stupid and learning from that mistake. And this is why I always say your daily P&L don't mean shit. And anyone that debates me on that, you do not know what the fuck you're talking about. Shut up. Like, zip it. I don't want to hear it. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a fucking newbie that doesn't have that zip filter. Zip the lip, man. You don't know what you're talking about, because that right there is such an important lesson. You know, if I would have taken the easy road and just lied to myself, I don't know if I would be sitting here. You know that? I really don't.
Because
I don't know.
if you allowed yourself to be rewarded for that behavior, not financially is what you're saying, but mentally, right, emotionally, it would have attached itself to your ego, and your ego would have grown through that. And then what
Yep.
happens is you would always reflect on that trade and say, oh, well, I did it before and I made this money back. So now I'm going to continue this behavior. And sooner or later, that day would be arriving where you keep adding, and you keep fixing, and keep fixing. And as we know, you can't fix a bad trade. No amount of money in the world will fix a bad trade.
No.
And
No.
you probably would have been taken down a road that would have said, this person doesn't have the character. So you're going to be taken out of the game.
Well, it reminds me greatly, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it's somebody, I use him as an example, and it's a lot of people take it the wrong way and they think it's because I'm just like dogging on the fucking guy. It's not that. It's just that he's such a perfect case study for what not to do as a trader. The problem is he's got away with it for far too long, and he has blown up massively on DRYS. It's a stock that's no longer, it's a shipper, back in the shipper days. And he blew up. And I remember watching the squeeze on dries. And I think I made like 30 or 40 grand on dries that day. And then once I saw that level of volatility, I was just like, get the fuck out. And I told every last member to get the fuck out. But he got caught up in it, completely blew up. He disappeared for a couple of years. Now he's back. He's doing the same shit. And he constantly he takes trades exactly like Sig, but he's never honest with himself. He'll have huge $1 million gains, $1 million losses. You know who I'm talking about now, right? And he's never learned his mistake. And when you see, if you actually look at the daily chart on all of the biggest losses, he's never taken the time to look at the daily chart and realize that as a day trader is your Bible. That is what you base the majority of your trades off of, or should. He misses very easy trades and this and that, but it's because he's made a lot of money where that ego, exactly what Adam just was talking about, it's overtaken him to where he can't see the truth behind his shortcomings as a trader to evolve past them. And that's what happens. You know, there's another trader that comes to my mind where he's very famously taken $1 million trade on Fannie Mae. And he made that trade when he was very young in his trading career. And he never evolved past that. And the reason why I can say that is because I used to be, I don't want to say close to the guy, but we spoke quite often on the phone. And the one thing that raised my alarm bells, he runs with some other traders, a service as well. But this is before he had a service. And he's, at that time, one of the most well-respected traders on the planet, like retail traders on the planet. But I got to know him on a personal level, and I spoke to him quite often. And the one thing that caught my attention is the way he looked at the markets was from a very like a first-year day trader. Like this shit he would say, it's like, oh no, you're wrong. And it's not opinion-based, right? These weren't opinion-based things. It was about the mechanics of the market and how it moves. And it's one of those things like a professional will know another professional. And a professional, someone that does this and has been through the ringer and done this, done that in the markets, you can sniff out bullshit a mile away. That's what a lot of people don't understand. So I believe he made a lot of money on that first trade, never evolved past it. And he's been bullshit ever since. He'll do well, sure. He'll post his great trades. But the losers, he won't. You understand? It's kind of one of those things. And I think he's got He's got a lot of people fooled, and it's a shame that people can't see through that, because then it becomes the blind leading the blind is what's going on. And I know we kind of strayed off there, but I think it's a really important thing to note. If somebody is saying something about the markets that's like, it's not like a complex thought, it's something very elementary. It would be like saying technical analysis doesn't work or something like that. It's like, well, then you don't understand technicals, because that's how I trade. And it's literally, it's one of the best strategies you can have. It's along those lines, if you guys are kind of picking up my drift here.
Mm-hmm.
And that ego is like, if you don't evolve past, and you can't get over that, like when you make money in a really bad way, right? People will focus on that money, and it's not a good thing.
No, it takes your eye off the real goal, which is just to do what we do well. You know, it's whether no matter what we do in life, we should just do it well. And if the money is the motivator, it never works.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about your next kind of biggest trade that you ever took? Your biggest or your biggest comeback?
So this one is one of the biggest days I've ever had. Came out to be about $600,000. Pushing $700,000 is what I made on that day. And let me pull it up.
You know, and just real quick, I guess maybe an asterisk here, because people can take this stuff wrong. You know, the goal isn't to be braggadocious, I think, talking about this stuff. But it's, to me, it's about the culmination of everything we've been talking about since we hit the record button. It's about test of character. It's about discipline. It's about controlling the ego. And well, what does that lead to? Well, it leads to unimaginable opportunity. And so I really think it's not about the money, right? You just said a very big number that every person probably hears out like a Pavlov dog who's going to start drooling. But it's like, this is the culmination of daily habits, of daily discipline, of putting in the work and focusing on improving oneself every single day. And then rewards can happen, whether it's not even about the money. It's about the satisfaction of saying, I saw that. I took that. I believed in myself. You know what I mean? And just like, that's what this is really all about. So just let's not let that big number override the deeper elements of this conversation that are much more important.
No, exactly. I think a lot of people miss that, and they miss that point. Once they start hearing big numbers, there's one of two ways it can go. Either you can use it as either motivation, or you can use it to be a jealous, gross little person. And I know a lot of people are struggling right now. So talking about big numbers of, especially with P&L, don't get caught up in the P&L. There's much bigger teaching points and learning points, educational points from what we're talking about. So this was a trade that I took back in March of 2018, and it was on 3 stocks: SPY, Apple, MU. I was in Canada at the time. I was teaching remotely. I went to go see family. This was in the time of the US-China trade deal with President Trump. So this is that US-China trade deal first coming or falling apart, where there were tariffs. And then this was a lot of it. Okay. And then we obviously had some massive sell-offs and everything else. This was COVID, right? This was US-China trade deals and Iran. There was some Iranian problems as well. But it was right in this area here. And what had happened was, it was actually a red day. I don't get them very often. I have red trades quite often, but members will back me up on this one. Because I was trading back in Canada and I just wanted to go visit family, took some trades. I was a little early on them, but the trade was there. And it was on, I believe it might have even been this day. It was a massive day. So like I said, this here, I know I said March, but that was the beginning of the US-China trade deals falling apart and tariffs and everything else. And then I believe it was on this day right here. And what happened was there's a bear flag on the daily, right? Now, what you don't see on this day is the intraday movement, okay? And it would sell off, it would pop back up, and then it would squeeze back out. And that's kind of what happens a lot of the time with these trades, where a lot of people will look at it after the fact and they see it looks like it's just super easy because on the daily candle it looks like it just sold off. That's not the case. It's not what happened. It sold off, it popped back up, it consolidated, worked into a big trade on 3 stocks, because I know what I'm seeing on the daily chart is that kind of that start of that bear flag. And I know if it breaks that level, it's going to be a big day. So everything was lining up for it. And I took multiple positions in multiple trades to kind of hedge the volatility and everything else. So then you're not putting all your eggs into one basket, which is a really good point when you're actually working a bigger picture idea. On a bigger picture idea, you'll never see me just take one trade. There's usually either I hedge it and that's more advanced tactics. A lot of people think that hedging is easy. It isn't. You need to, and I've done lots of free videos on hedging that are wonderful. But I'll also take multiple positions because sometimes you can be completely right? And you'll take a trade, and then let's say it's SPY and Qs. You take the trade on SPY, it doesn't move the needle at all, but Qs completely sold off, and that's exactly what you were looking for. And I've learned that lesson through the years that on those bigger picture ideas, remember, this was a bigger picture idea. This isn't a typical day trading scenario. I will take multiple positions in multiple different trades, just basically widening out my odds. You can take bigger losses, sure, but as long as you keep it in that realm of risk safety, like you're not getting carried away with your risk, everything's fine. And that's basically what happened. So the morning session went well. There were some wins, some losses, but overall, I was actually red on the day. And I entered in on screen share. I entered in right before I left. So, and I even said, well, I'm going to set a hard stop on this one, entered into SPY, Apple, and MU. But I believe MU, I was still in on a trade. Okay. And Apple and SPY were re-entries. And what was going on the chart, and I can't pull up the 1 minute chart, but I can show you what it looked like. So what happened here is it popped, it consolidated, right? And it was just a very straight across consolidation. And then what happened is it popped up again and it started squeezing. So this was the loss, took it off somewhere in this neighborhood. And then what was happening is it was ranging, okay? And it was doing this. So I had very tight risk on it. There was really no risk. So I knew that if I just set my stop a little bit above these peaks, right? Give it a little bit, not much, because I didn't want to take a bigger loss. This was like, it was a reset trade. And that's all it was. It's not a revenge trade. It's something very different that I know what I'm looking at on the daily chart, and I'm willing to risk a bigger loss to solidify that gain. So I entered in multiple times short, working into a position. It actually wasn't a huge position on any of these. And then what happened, I left on my last entry right here. This is where I logged off. And I took my son out. We went to the museum in Edmonton, the provincial museum. There was some cool Viking exhibit going on there at that time. So we went and we checked that out, and we were just chilling around. And my son, he wanted to take some pictures. So we were walking around. I just bought a new camera and we were taking some pictures. We were probably gone for a couple hours, right? I wasn't monitoring my position at all. Remember, I had a hard stop set. And the whole time I'm in the museum, it's doing this. Remember, I haven't pulled any of that position off. Now, normally in that situation, I would have paid myself here and then, some other support. Maybe it rebounded and I paid myself some more there. And I would be holding very small for the run down. Well, that's not what happened. Why? Because I set a hard stop and I walked away. And it ended up retracing something like this, big retracement. And then it sold again. And it was a big sell-off. And when I got back in the truck, I got Liam in the truck. I'm sitting in the front. And I messaged Tino, the guy that was working for me at the time. And he goes, "Have you seen Spy?" Had no idea. Wasn't even looking at my phone. When I'm with family, I'm not looking at my phone. And I'm like, no. So I pulled up my mobile broker and I had to do a quadruple take at the amount of zeros that were going on there on all three positions. When you see something like that for the first time, because what you guys need to understand is I'm not a gambler. I'm a trader. I'm not looking to make hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single day trade, okay? So I don't have wins like that. That's not what I'm after. I go after making $3,000 to $5,000 a day with my experience level. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes I have big days. Sometimes I have smaller days. I don't care. I don't get wrapped up in the P&L. Because even if you make like $1,000 a day, which for me would be fairly small, and that's all I made, you're talking a very successful life, okay? So I'm not going after $100,000 trades. So when I looked at the screen, I'm on the phone with Tino, okay? I've got him on fucking speakerphone, and I'm telling him, and I screenshotted it and I sent it to him because it was so surreal. It made no sense. So remember, just a couple hours before, I've had a red day. It wasn't the greatest day, right? And I'm starting to feel better about the day because I went and hung out with family and walked around the city, taking pictures. A cool picture of an old guy that I've got on my Instagram that I titled The Man. Looks like an old 70s fucking just cool guy type of thing with a roll your own cigarette, and he's got a fucking cowboy hat on, but he's kind of fucking scruffy. It's a cool picture, actually. It's one of my most favorite pictures, and that's from that day. I'm looking at the fucking phone and it's not sinking in. Now, right here is where I'm on the phone with Tino, right at Lowe's, full size on 3 fucking positions the full way down. And it was well over $1 million. Okay. So I said to Tino, I don't know what to do. This is the first time in my trading career. I don't know what to do. And he goes, "Take it off, you fucking dummy." So he snapped me out of it, and I'm happy he did that. And I started peeling out. And as I'm peeling out, the rest of the world is peeling out. And this thing's starting to bounce. I don't care. It's not like I see that as losing profits at all. But I'm starting to get out. And remember, I got to taper out of these positions, but there was enough volume that I could take big chunks out, right? So on MU, I dumped the whole position. Just got the fuck out of that. Apple, I took it off in 2 or 3 exits. And then in SPY, I'm kind of playing with it, right? And I caught myself doing that. I caught myself, that greed bone kicked in. Okay. Now, at this point on Apple and MU, I probably locked in somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300,000 or something like that. Like, that's a house, man, right? And I've got another position on SPY, my biggest position, that is worth that alone. And I started playing with it like, oh, maybe I should leave some on to see what it does on the day. It wasn't long. Okay. I don't want to tell you that I like, it was like, got all super greedy and fucking gambler like, or no. It was very quick. And I caught myself doing and saying that to myself. And then I'm just like, fucking dump it. So dump the rest of the position. Didn't give a fuck what it did on the day. And locked in almost $700,000, 600 and change, if I remember correctly. I was up over $1 million on that. It was probably like 1.1, 1.2 at its peak. And that hesitation, you could say, cost me 50% of the profits, because it kind of did, right? Not knowing what to do. And it's interesting because there's always going to be some people commenting because they think they know that they can put themselves in that position. You don't know. Again, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But some lessons that I learned about that one, it's very difficult for people not to get hung up on the P&L. And what you guys all need to remember that are saying it's like, oh, let's see your broker statements. On this trade, this was shared. This was shared with multiple members. All of my entries charts were posted. Did a whole recap on it, but I actually left the P&L out on this. I never discussed the P&L at the time, because I think when you start talking about big numbers, it can really bring in the wrong type of people. And I want you guys to think about that for a second. Like, that's who you're talking with right now. I had an opportunity to post a $600,000 gain, verified, legitimate. And I could have, but I didn't. I held back that P&L. And all I had for transparency was sharing it with a few members that I trusted and I respected, as well as all the moderators at Trick Trades. And that was it. And of course, people would make the comment like, yeah, sure, yeah, right. Guys, if I have a $600,000 trade that I could put out there to the world, and I'm holding it back because I don't want to bring in the wrong type of fucking people into my service or into my universe, that should tell you a lot about who you're fucking talking with here. Because most people would just post that shit. Now, I ended up doing a mentoring live class about that after, and then now, fast forward, the entire mentoring live class has now had verification and full transparency. But the lessons on that, I think the biggest takeaway is trusting yourself, like following a strategy, not being afraid to take a loss. And I think a lot of people do that. They'll take a small loss in the morning, and because they see that red trade on their account, they can't get over it. And I'm not saying, like, if you're very new to trading, you should only be doing a one and done type of scenario. I'm talking about getting into, like, you're starting to get novice and intermediate, and you have the skills and the education behind you to work a reset trade. Don't be afraid. We expose ourselves to risk, right? Varying degrees of risk. And then we size appropriately to that risk. Now, you guys may see a $600,000+ trade on this, but what you don't realize is actually it was pretty small. They weren't big positions. It was just the amount of range at full size. That's all that it was. If I was in front of the computer on this one, it would have been like probably $10,000, $15,000, maybe $20,000 day maximum, which obviously a very nice day, and I wouldn't have complained. But it's one of those things where it's like, don't be afraid to just set a hard stop and walk away, man. Like, when you're at the point of, okay, either it's going to be a good day or it's going to be a bad day, right? You kind of just over it. And I'm not saying that is the most disciplined approach, because it isn't. But I'm just telling you what the real world approach is, because that's what it is. It's just a real world scenario where you had a bad morning, but you knew that the timing was just incorrect. And again, you're not going to know that unless you know. And I knew my timing was just off on that. It's just a timing thing. And because I was with family, I don't have the time to monitor this position and I can't keep fucking with it. I got to go. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to take that trade. I am going to take that trade and I'm going to set a hard stop. And some of you might ask, well, how do you set hard stops on options? That can be difficult. Yeah, it is. But on that, I didn't care. It was it was basically what I do. And I could do a video on how to do that. That might help a few of you guys, but I don't know if you trade options the way I do. I trade options very differently. Unless you're going to come roll with me, it might not help you. But this is an amazing comeback in the way of, from where I started to leading up to this trade. And I've had huge trades since this, but this one really, really stuck out because I remember looking at that P&L, it didn't make sense. There were so many zeros going on there that I had to count them. And I'm like, I thought there was a glitch, but I could see the chart and I could see that I'm in on the trade. It was still like thinking about it. It's still surreal. That's what I want more than anything. At some point, and everybody that's watching this, I want you to experience that just once. Here's the thing though. I didn't go out looking for that, right? Like, it's not like I set out to make $1 million trade. Remember, at Lowe's, that thing was $1.2 million. I never set out for that. It's not what I set out to do. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting it to get back into like maybe morning lows.
Such an important part of this whole story. This is, I think, something I can feel internally I'm at the cusp of, and it's having the strength to just purely let go. And what's cool about this day is you let go to be with your son, right? Yep. You could have let the money and getting green on the day and watching your red trade, and you would have said, "Hey, son, can I take a rain track?" Right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you could have done that, but you said, "No, I'm going to go spend time with my son." And that's actually what makes the cherry on top. Is you stuck to your principles and you did not let money control your life. You, in a way, you were incredibly rewarded for it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway in the story is it's really our character that gets rewarded when we least expect it. Things will just opportunities in life, whether it is money or other things that we want to happen, whether it's a relationship. I know it's how Jen and I met, letting go. And just be with the flow of life. And that's a perfect day where you're out at the museum and you got this great picture. You're spending time with your son and you're being in the flow of life and you're not holding on to your money. And look at what happened. And I think that's an incredible comeback right there.
I think when you do things right, you do what you are supposed to do in life. And I'm not talking about in trading. Like, I'm talking about just morally. Mm-hmm. And what you should be doing as a man or a woman, as an adult. Life does reward you. See, where I think a lot of people go wrong is I think that they get caught up in what they think they should be doing. And what they think they should be doing is actually the opposite. That's just the truth of it. Because they go and they start wanting to chase money and stuff like that. And like Adam said, I could have stayed home and I could have told my son, "Hey, look, bud, I'm in a position." He was pretty young back then, so I don't think he would have understood. But instead, I chose to, be with my kid, man.
So you have both.
That's
you get both. You get the memories of the day, and you have your greatest comeback of all time. I mean, that's the paradox of this. It's the irony in this whole game we're trying to master. It's you hold on, you get nothing, you let go, and you have stuff like that happen on its own. You couldn't have forced it. You wouldn't have.
No. No, and that's just it. It's like there is no forcing this, right? Like I think when you try and force it, that's when real bad things happen. Like I did at the beginning of my career, trying to force it. It's not going to work, man. You know, like trying to force it just isn't going to work.
Oh, you got the photo?
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. That's cool.
That's a cool fucking shot, man. That's
How
fucking
do we
sick.
all have the same color shirt?
Yeah, no shit.
That's funny.
Yeah,
That's gonna be us
yeah,
in 40 years.
yeah, yeah. Fucking sick shot. Yeah, I think spending time with your family and your loved ones is why we get into this. And it's very easy for traders to forget that when you're in it, because you're just in it. You're like a dog seeing red constantly as a trader, right? And we neglect our loved ones at the beginning. And that's another thing I always told myself, that at the beginning, I have a lot of hard decisions to make, and I needed to get selfish in order to be successful. And that's become a very popular catchphrase now, but I've been saying that for years, man. And because it's just the truth. You just have to. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. They don't know how to put themselves first. But I think what's really important to understand, and what people forget when they tell themselves, oh, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. Because I'll tell you what, when you do make it to the other side, as long as you don't lose yourself along the way,
Mhm.
you can always make up for it. Do you understand? You can always make up for the times that you weren't there as a father or a husband or a mother or a wife, because you had to put yourself first for your loved ones. A lot of people don't know how to do that. And that's why I'm sitting here, because I made a decision in my life 11 years ago to put myself first for now, for the short term. So then I can put my family first for the rest of my life and the rest of theirs and the rest of their kids' life and so on. To build generational wealth is doable. People don't think that it is, because that's what everybody tells you. You're born broke, you'll die broke. Fuck that. I was born broke. I just was never going to accept that. But getting back to the point of being selfish, yeah, just get selfish, guys. Start putting yourself first. If you notice that, and I'll tell you from experience, what I noticed back then at the beginning of my career is I would get 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes 5 steps forward, 10 steps back. And what kept happening was things would come up that would set me back financially, to where I felt like I had to help that person, or I had to help in that situation. And when I decided to say, nope, no more, I need to focus on myself so then I can properly take care of my friends and family later, guess what you have to do? You have to. And I think that that's part of like the biggest comeback. And number 4 is exactly that. The biggest comeback for me is, it's not even any of these trades. That conversation that I had started all of this. But I think to go back even prior to that was making the decision to get selfish, start putting myself first, and then the redemption afterwards. Years later, you've made it, you're financially stable and successful. You can basically use the stock market as a fucking faucet to turn on money, because that's the reality. I know some people don't like to hear that. They think that's like fucking bragging or ego or whatever. It's not. Once you really know what you're doing, that's what it is. Like there's levels to this shit, guys, right? And that's the biggest comeback, is to be able to years ago be selfish, and now to come back and make up for that selfishness. Because people on the other end, they're not gonna realize what you're doing at that time. They're gonna look at you like you are just being selfish. and you're not thinking straight and you're a gambler and you're never going to make it and this and that, right? They're not going to get it. They're going to lash out because what they're trying to do is protect you. They're trying to protect you from yourself, right? From making bad decisions. But when you believe in yourself so much, and you just know deep down in your bones that you will give 100% to this, just take that shit on the chin and fast forward now, you can always make up for it. Because the ability to retire my parents, my dad's an old broken welder, knees all fucked up, back all fucked up, had to keep working. To retire them on that day, and I mean, fuck, there's a video on that where I talked about that, where I just hadn't talked to them in a while because of a lot of that shit, right? I just stopped talking to them. I have the ability to cut people very quickly. And then showing up at the house and just walking in the house, telling them, you're not working anymore, right? You're fucking retired as of today. Call in and quit. That's it. Don't worry about your fucking pension. Don't worry about anything. Who gives a fuck? Fuck that shit. What's left owing on the house? Oh, okay. That'll be wired into your account tomorrow. Pay the house off. Get that shit done. And I'm not saying that you make up for lost time or that selfishness with money, but I'll tell you what, when you don't have money, that's a big relief. It's the ability to take people's stress away. I think that's the biggest thing, because money equals stress. Financial problems, financial stress equals stress, because that's the only thing I ever stressed about. I never stressed about anything else. The only thing I ever stressed about was money, right? And when you trust yourself and you trust the process, this is what comes of it.
That's a lot. There's a lot to appreciate in the stories here today. Really thank you for sharing that and opening up a lot. And hopefully this helps some people just persevere and just let go. Trust yourself and let go. And then those comebacks will happen.
Exactly. And remember, folks, for those of you that are watching this, upon its original first release, August 5th, we have a free webinar. The link will be in the description. RSVP. It's a free webinar. We're going to go over how to enter, how to exit, and how not to blow yourself up in this election year, because it's about to get wild. Okay, Adam, thanks for the conversation, and we will see you guys later. Adios.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Pat.